Greetings. I'm Jacqueline Simmons, Senior Executive Editor for the Americas at Bloomberg, and I am honored to be in the virtual presence of Dr. Cecilia Rouse. Dr. Rouse, recently named chair of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors. She's a former member of the council under President Barack Obama, a Princeton economist, and I could go on. But Dr. Rouse, welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So you've been in your role for just a couple weeks now. I want to start with where we came from pre-pandemic. So the end of 2019, the start of 2020 was a lot of firsts in the economy. Black and Latino unemployment at a record low, ditto for disabled workers, and women were entering the workforce in a significant way. That was then, and this is now. And virtually every one of those metrics has since reversed. So in the spirit of this Equality Summit, how do we chart a course back to those kinds of 2019 levels for specific demographics like the ones I mentioned?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the first thing I would say is that is the entire focus and purpose of the American Rescue Plan. During a pandemic that involves a very contagious virus, the way we get to the other side is by, reducing our physical contact, which means reducing physical and economic activity. And so all of those statistics that you just cited are the byproduct of a slowdown in activity. So the American Rescue Plan is designed to help us all get to the other side. Obviously, this comes on the heels of the CARES Act and the bill that was passed in December. But the whole purpose is we are not out of the hole yet. We need to be helping our workers continue to pay their rent and to continue to help their children and to help the businesses to get through as well. But your point is one about where was the economy back in February 2019, where on average it was doing fine. Unemployment was at historically low rates. And as it was for Black workers, for Hispanic workers, as you just pointed out, but really there were still gaps between the success and the economic activity of white workers and Black workers and Hispanic workers, for example. And so what I would argue is we want to get back to where we were in 2019, and we want to go beyond that, and that is really the foundation between Build Back Better. So the American Rescue Plan is designed to put us back on footing so that we're poised to build back even better once we get to the other side of the pandemic. I want to highlight one aspect that is really important for women, as I think has been widely cited. Women have dropped out of the labor force in disproportionate numbers over the course of this pandemic. The reason is obvious. They are, family care still falls disproportionately on women. And so women, when they have to choose between taking care of their children, helping their children with schoolwork, taking care of their parents, it's just too hard to juggle that and work when schools are closed, when our child care centers are closed. So an important part of the American Rescue Plan is our investments in schools so they can reopen. It's our investments in state and local government so they can be providing the resources so that actually schools can reopen and compensate for some of the deficits that children have encumbered. And importantly, we are accelerating the speed of vaccination because it's really through vaccination, maintaining our physical distancing, that we'll get to the other side. So the way that we're going to get back and make it better is by first getting to the other side of this pandemic.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on that because Vice President Harris, who I watched swear you in as chair of the CEA, she said in an op-ed that the exodus of women from the workforce is a national emergency. And it's interesting that even in one of the hottest labor markets on record for women pre-pandemic, we still lagged developed countries which have programs like subsidized childcare, paid family leave. I myself benefited from another system. My kids were born and were babies in France. What will it take to bring the U.S. in line with countries like France or even, looking north to Canada?
Well, I think that what we have to recognize is that if we're going to support women in the workforce, we have to ensure that they have the support that they need at home. We also need to be looking at all of our different policies and ensuring that they are gender neutral, that they're not disproportionately, disaffecting women. There are places where we can see some unintended consequences at times. We know we're about to celebrate, Equal Pay Day, where we recognize that on average in 2020, women earned 82 cents on the dollar compared to men. And so we need to do better than that. Women should be paid the same for equal work. So, but I think fundamentally what we can be doing at the federal level is ensuring that women and other caretakers, but there are disproportionately women, have the support that they need in order to balance their family responsibilities and their work. And I would also add ensuring that jobs pay well. So, with policies such as the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage has not been raised in 10 years. Ensuring that our home health workers have good jobs, that they don't have to be working 2 or 3 jobs and stitching them together in order to make a decent living. So I think those are some of the ways in which we ensure that women, especially people of color, are making a fair wage for fair work.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about that because cases, the people of color point, cases have been made by the likes of, Janelle Jones, the Department of Labor's chief economist, and others, that the Fed should target the Black unemployment rate. Jerome Powell very recently said the Fed is looking at this closely, but he also said it's not practical to forecast it specifically. So should the Fed be targeting an unemployment rate for Blacks, for Hispanics, for women before raising interest rates?
So in the new framework that the Federal Reserve Board has put out, one of the things that they have said is it's not just enough for there to be low unemployment in general, that we need to ensure that we've got low unemployment rates that are broadly shared. So that may not be the same as specifically targeting, but he and his colleagues have stated that they will view that the economy has returned to full health when it's not just one group or another that's doing well, but when the economy is working for everybody.
Right. And very quickly in terms of the policies around that, how do we get to a point where policymakers are, again, explicitly taking into account these kinds of disparities when measuring economic health? What needs to happen there?
So this administration, so President Biden, Vice President Harris, are really committed to ensuring that racial equity, that gender equity are infused throughout the federal government, throughout our policymaking. Here at the Council of Economic Advisors, for example, we are really doing a careful look at federal statistics and to ensure that there are adequate samples of people for different groups so that we can measure and be keeping track of, for example, the unemployment rate by subgroups. One group that we really know very little about are Native Americans, for example, because their numbers are small, and in many federal databases, their sample sizes are not large enough for us to adequately know what's happening. So that's one small way in which we're all trying to ensure that the policies that we are trying to put forth will, that we can see and we can measure what their impact is across the board. But more generally, this administration is looking at how our policies are affecting different groups of people. For example, we know that with the EITC, over 20% of recipients who are eligible to receive an EITC payment do not take it up because of the complications of tax filing, et cetera. So this administration, and those are disproportionately workers of color. So this administration wants to do an aggressive campaign and make sure that people understand what they're entitled to and how they can take that up. That's a lot of what the president has been talking about this week, as has the vice president and members of the cabinet, in really hoping that people and helping the American people know what's in the American Rescue Plan so that they can take advantage of it and benefit from it, because it was designed for them.
Okay. One thing, that's in the news, and being Bloomberg, as you can imagine, we had a robust discussion this morning in the newsroom about rising Treasury yields after Chairman Powell indicated he wasn't too concerned about a recent surge in long-term yields, and he's focused on conditions staying accommodative. But do you think a sharp increase in rates, including the 10-year, threatens growth or threatens the recovery?
So right now, our labor market, our economy is still in a deep hole. We know that we've lost 9.5 million jobs since last year. Just today, initial claims for unemployment insurance were reported for last week, and they have ticked up. And so we're now in the 52nd week where we have initial claims that are higher than at any level recorded before this pandemic. So we know we still have a long way to go. And I believe that is part of the reason why Chairman Powell in the Federal Reserve does not feel that we are yet in a place where the economy is overheating. That said, the American Rescue Plan was a big, bold infusion of resources into our economy. And so it's possible that we will see some inflation. I think many people believe that those inflation expectations are well anchored, so that if there is a bout of inflation, it would be short. But let's also understand that we've had many years where inflation has been below what the Federal Reserve targets it to be. So if we have a short period where it's above, that's actually where the Fed in their new framework wants us to be. So I am not the Federal Reserve Board. I think that the economy still has a long way to go, but if I read what their policy is, they expect maybe there will be a short period of inflation, but that they believe that we'll come back down fairly quickly and that we're still in a good place.
So I know we have just about 5 minutes left, but I did want to really hit a topic that's close to my heart because I'm working with a team here on an 8-part podcast series about the racial wealth gap. And one of our experts who we talked to, William Darity, an economist and professor at Duke, he says the only way to definitively close the racial wealth gap is through reparations. And I just wondered what you thought about that.
Well, look, I think we all have really come to appreciate and understand that not only do we see differences in income between Blacks and whites, but that accumulates over time and rolls up and into wealth, and that many of this goes back, one can date it back to slavery and the fact that there were not reparations paid after the Civil War. What's the right way to address it today, I think, is an open question. I think it's one that should that merits study, and that we should understand the ways in which we want to help and make sure that all Americans are able to participate in this economy. And structural inequalities is not healthy. It means we're leaving productivity on the table. Just as we know that income inequality and wealth inequality is not helpful to economic growth. So I think we want to be looking at an aggressive set of policies to address those kinds of structural inequalities, and I think we should be looking at it.
I've probably time for just one more question because I know you got to go. But for those of us who can't experience the vibe of the White House right now, and from a really big distance, it feels miles apart from where we came from before January. I just wondered if you could describe the vibe there at a time when multitasking is probably an understatement. Fix the economy, get vaccines in arms, bridge crucial demographic brackets, reverse policies. There's a lot going on. What does that feel like? And how does one prioritize in this exceptional environment?
That's a really good question. And I would just like to add that as part of that vibe is we're largely remote because we are still in a pandemic. And so many of our team members are not here. And so what I would say the vibe is this is a team that really wants to do the right thing for the American people. And I say that with all sincerity, that there is a deep understanding of not only the challenges of this past year and the fact that there are those for whom this past year has been an inconvenience, and for others for whom it has been utterly devastating personally, professionally, economically. And so the first focus of all of my colleagues has been, what can we do to help people get to the other side of this pandemic? It's also an administration that deeply understands and cares about the increasing income inequality that we've had in this country over the past several decades, and the structural differences and racism that we've got in this country, and wants to do better by that as well. And so it is a team that is up to this task of uber multitasking because the team feels the urgency of now, and they understand the role that government can play, a productive role that government can play in the lives of American people, and they want to see if we can make as much progress as possible.
20 seconds. President Biden's stimulus includes money for child care centers and for families. Is it economically sensible to just make these measures permanent?
Well, I think that I think making them permanent is one important way that we can be supporting families. It's a way to help reduce income inequality. And as at the top of the hours, we're talking about the lives of women in the workforce and otherwise, helping them to better raise their children. And of course, this would not just be for women, but for all families, but to making that easier so that we can reduce child poverty, and we can help families really ensure that their kids are off to a good start. I think that's very important.
Dr. Rouse, thank you so much for taking the time to share your views. I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much.